The representative topics template is one that asks you to move from the basic principles and concepts of the field to actually selecting some representative topics that you could actually work with your students to experience. The reason this is important is that there are core principles and concepts in the field that we've already discussed, and those are the standards that you want to teach to. However, within any given discipline, there are thousands of case studies. There are hundreds of particular topics that you could work from. For example, if we were to look in the field of English literature, if you wanted to teach students how to work with heroes or how to understand satire, well, in either of those cases, you could come up with hundreds of examples of short stories, novels, or poems that you could use to teach those concepts. Like for the concept of a hero, you could look at Beowulf. You could look at Hercules. You could look at female heroines. And so, instead of having to teach every piece of literature that deals with a hero, you want to select those that are most representative to the field and those that allow you to teach as many concepts as possible to your students within that single piece of literature. So that way, students, instead of having to read perhaps 1,000 pages worth of text in order to learn 5 major principles and 20 concepts, they might be able to read 400 pages worth of text, in which they're able to still learn the exact same concepts and the exact same principles effectively. And by being strategic about the representative topics that you choose, you can get more bang for your buck, and perhaps then move on to additional concepts and additional principles that are also important to the field. Too often as educators, we end up teaching so many different subjects to our students without being able to get to as many concepts and principles. And so we want to turn that on its head. So beginning with the principles and the concepts on the left-hand side, you then want to identify the core representative topics that you'll utilize. So for example, for gifted education, if we're looking at the principle and concepts of differentiation and acceleration being part of a gifted ed program, then some topics that we may want to introduce would be the school-wide enrichment model as one model of enrichment that allows gifted education students to work with mentors, to work with an adult that shares a core hobby or an interest in a similar subject, that then also allows students to explore their own interests in a deep and meaningful way, that explore that interest in a way that is connected to real-world applications. And so instead of having to teach hundreds of differentiation models or hundreds of different enrichment procedures, you can use the school-wide enrichment model to teach the idea of mentorship, to teach the idea of learning being authentic, to interact with gifted students in a way that allows them to have choice and that works off of their imagination. And all of those concepts can be taught through school-wide enrichment model. But if I attempted to go through every possible enrichment strategy when teaching gifted education, I wouldn't have time to cover all of them, and I wouldn't necessarily have time to get to all of the other concepts and principles that are important. So I lay out my principles and concepts that I want to cover in my class, and then I strategically choose representative topics that allow me to cover as many of those concepts and principles as possible with a single model. Another model that I might use, because often it's good to not just do one representative topic, but maybe have 2 or 3. Second representative topic that I might use in this course would be a sample mathematics program that gives an example of a student going from kindergarten through 12th grade utilizing differentiated instruction, cyber schools or other computer-based technology for education, curriculum-based assessments to be able to see whether the student is achieving the standards that are laid out in each of the various math courses, whether it's 4th grade math or Algebra 1 or Calculus, using curriculum-based assessments to track their process in an inexpensive way, as well as looking at the possibilities of dual enrollment, where maybe the student is in middle school for most of their school day, but they move up to the high school for a calculus class, or they go to take a class at the local college once they move beyond calculus A, B, and BC. And so by introducing the students in a gifted education master's degree program to concept of school-wide enrichment models, as well as the concept of a single case study of a student moving through a K-12 math program, I'm able to introduce a lot of the concepts and principles of gifted education without having to give hundreds of case studies or dozens of enrichment models that could be implemented. And so I can introduce the idea of best practices, introduce a variety of journals to my students that will have additional examples for them, and yet I've managed to get through the material that I need to get through with the time that's allotted, and you cover more core information with less repetition. Hopefully this explains the representative topics template and the reason why we use it. Again, what it boils down to is being strategic about the topics that you teach in order to introduce the core concepts and principles that are the most important component of education. If you have any questions, feel free to make a posting in one of the discussion boards or send me an email. Hopefully it's been helpful, and we'll talk to you soon.